Unraveling Italy's dark shadows, Operation Gladio. Picture this: Italy, a nation in rubble and caught in the crosshairs of post-World War II Cold War tensions, becomes the stage of a covert struggle that would shape its history for decades. From the 1950s through the 1980s, the CIA and NATO orchestrated a clandestine operation known as Operation Gladio, involving secret stay-behind armies ready to counter a potential Soviet invasion. But the reality was far murkier. Operation Gladio was designed as a network of guerrilla fighters embedded across Western Europe. In Italy, the network didn't just prepare for an invasion, it engaged in a strategy of tension. There's the strategic deception. Covertly manipulating events to create chaos and fear. There's the perpetual security dilemma, all to prevent a communist takeover. There's the nemesis. Enter Licio Gelli, a man at the heart of this shadowy world. Gelli was master of the Propaganda Due, or P2 Lodge, a secret Masonic organization that wielded immense power. P2 infiltrated the highest echelons of Italian society, including the mafia, politicians, the judiciary, intelligence, police chiefs, the military, and the media. It was a web of influence pulling most, if not all, of the strings behind the scenes. Giulio Andreotti, Italy's prime minister for life and also former master of P2, was a political titan often linked to these murky dealings. He was known by the nicknames Il Divo, Il Duce, and the Hunchback, and his life and career are so intertwined with Italy's mafia and covert operations that they inspired the critically acclaimed film Il Divo, which paints a portrait of power, corruption, and survival. Andreotti was under suspicion, under investigation, or on trial multiple times during his tenure, and during one of the inquiries they asked, "Isn't it true that you were the master of the P2 Lodge?" To which he replied, "I've always been more ambitious than to be the master of just one lodge." Amidst this backdrop, the Red Brigades, a far-left Marxist-Leninist terrorist group, launched a campaign of terror during Italy's years of lead. Their most infamous act was the kidnapping and murder of Aldo Moro in 1978. Moro, a former prime minister himself, was negotiating a historic compromise with the communists, a move seen as a threat by many to include the democratic Christian right establishment. The 1991 movie Year of the Gun captures the chaotic atmosphere of Italy during this period, blending fact and fiction. This film starred Andrew McCarthy. It was one of the first featuring Sharon Stone, and you get to see a lot of Valeria Golina, if you know what I mean. It doesn't get stellar reviews, but that might be because it's a bit long and dry, and the complicated plot follows the confusion of Italy in those times, and thus it's not really easy to follow. Note that the Red Brigades publicly claimed responsibility for the kidnapping and murder of Aldo Moro. Supposedly, the Red Brigade saw Moro as a symbol of the Italian state and targeted him to destabilize the government and advance their revolutionary aims, which is contentious and debated to this day because it seems contradictory to their leftist Marxist-Leninist group. The financial world was also not immune to the chaos of the times. Roberto Calvi, known as God's banker, was entangled in the collapse of Banco Ambrosiano, a scandal that rocked Italy and revealed deep connections to the Vatican Bank, Mafia, and P2. The bank was linked to the Vatican through letters of comfort issued by the church to secure loans, among other things. Calvi, Gelli, Andreotti, and others link it to P2 and the Mafia, and its bad compliance, mismanagement, fraud, regulatory failures, and others caused the bank to file for bankruptcy in 1982 to the tune of about $1.5 billion. This is roughly $5 billion in today's dollars, and a massive scandal ensued. Licio Gelli fled the country allegedly with a load of currency, was eventually apprehended and imprisoned in Switzerland, from which he managed to escape, and he was later apprehended again and convicted in 1992 of fraud and financing right-wing terror charges. He was eventually released due to shortened sentences of standing charges and some of the charges being dismissed due to lack of evidence. and was later nominated as a candidate for a Nobel Prize in Literature. Future Italian Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi was listed as a member of P2 back in the day, and Gelli said in 2003 it seemed that P2 Democratic Rebirth Plan was being implemented by Silvio Berlusconi. As for Roberto Calvi in 1982, shortly after the bank collapse, he was found hanging under London's Blackfriars Bridge, and I don't mean hanging out. He was hung. And this wasn't even Jeffrey Epstein. He was murdered. So this fueled speculation of murder linked to his knowledge of illicit activities. Due to the overall political landscape, the CIA's heavy involvement in Italy supporting anti-communist efforts and covert operations such as Operation Gladio, numerous links about 1 degree of separation, and the CIA's historical involvement in shady banking, it's reasonable to suspect the CIA used Banco Ambrosiano. As these threads weave together, the story of Italy's post-war years unfolds like a thriller, rife with covert operations, political intrigue, financial scandals, and even murder. The interplay between the CIA's clandestine missions, the strategic use of fear, and the mechanizations of powerful figures like Gelli, Andreotti, Calvi, and others create a narrative as compelling as any Hollywood script. The CIA's involvement in Operation Gladio was part of a broader NATO strategy during Cold War to establish clandestine stay-behind networks across Europe. These networks were designed to act as a resistance force in the event of a Soviet invasion. In Italy, the operation extended into the realm of covert actions aimed at countering communist influence, sometimes involving manipulation of the media, political events, and shaping public opinion through a strategy of tension, which included creating or staging events. This strategy allegedly included supporting far-right groups to conduct acts of terrorism, thereby fostering fear and instability to discredit communist and left-wing movements. The exposure of Operation Gladio in the 1990s revealed the depth of these covert activities and their controversial impact on European politics. The realities of Gladio are not in much dispute, as several national leaders, including Andreotti, have admitted their involvement in Gladio or use of Gladio tactics during the Cold War and the buildup of NATO. These historical events are not just tales of the past, they offer a stark reminder of how power operates in the shadows, influencing the course of nations. The legacy of Operation Gladio, the strategy of tension, and the interconnected webs of influence in Italy serve as a potent testament to the lengths governments and organizations will go in the name of power, security, and control. I argue Operation Gladio is currently being conducted globally.